Good afternoon, everyone. It's David Schlotthauer here with another detailed update on potential Tropical Cyclone 5 for Monday, August the 12th, 2024. So, taking a look at the latest GOES 16 True Color Visible Satellite Imagery provided by Dr. Levi Cowan at tropicaltidbits.com. And we can see our area of disturbed weather here, of course, potential Tropical Cyclone 5. Possibly by the time this video is uploaded around 1 o'clock this afternoon Pacific Daylight Time, this could be a tropical depression. We will show you some evidence with that in just a second. But all this disturbed weather is moving towards these islands. So regardless of if this is a tropical storm or a tropical depression, it's not going to matter a whole lot. There will be a lot of heavy rainfall, flooding, storm surge, and high surf along to go with gusty winds as this area of disturbed weather moves generally this way and then possibly will turn to the north right around the Puerto Rico area right before it reaches the Dominican Republic. Now, the reason why I do think that potential Tropical Cyclone 5 will be upgraded to a tropical depression in the next National Hurricane Center advisory for the 5 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time frame. If we look at the low-level structure on the system, we do have southwesterly winds down here, so we are beginning to get a more sharper wave here axis that develops. And then if we look closely here, we begin to see more southeasterly and southerly winds. And of course, to the north here, well easily seen, we have low-level easterly flow, and then the winds come back around like this. But what we don't see very well here is a semblance of a low-level circulation. If you look at the cloud cover here very closely, you can see a little bit of a swirl moving generally westward here, embedded within this large envelope of energy, of spin that is beginning to show up here on satellite. So it remains a question, does Recon find anything with this system? We will show you that here in a second. But right now, based on what I see, it's not going to take much for this to become a tropical depression. And like I said, I think in the next National Hurricane Center advisory, in the next 3 or 4 hours, I think they're going to have a depression on this without a doubt. So looking at the water vapor imagery, the environment surrounding this wave, like we talked about in yesterday's live stream and in the video prior to that, is the system is within an environment of plenty of moisture. There is a little bit of a tongue of drier air here over the northern Leeward Islands, but that drier air is beginning to get nudged out of the way because of the cirrus outflow. You can see the feathery white cirrus here, indicating that we have pretty good divergent easterly flow aloft, and the shear seems to be abating a little bit. You can even see flow here on the cirrus clouds beginning to come more out of the northeasterly direction. So this wave now is moving into a much more conducive environment that is able to sustain these deeper thunderstorms. See these convection increasing in organization is a sign that the wave is beginning to organize slightly as it moves into a better environment. So now the reason why I do think this is going to be upgraded to a tropical depression status at the very most for the time being is when we look at the Air Force mission that is now currently en route or currently in the storm. So they're flying through, taking some measurements and observations. And right now, what they have found so far is of course you have your easterly winds over here. So that's what we have. That's well seen on satellite. But what we now have is a circulation, a closed circulation. We have southwesterly winds here coming in out of this general direction where the plane is currently. And these darker green teal colors do indicate that winds are at about 20 to 25 knots. That would make this a tropical depression, but it is going to be interesting to see if they find northwesterly winds on this side. If they do, this could in fact be a tropical depression. It doesn't surprise me, in fact, because if we do look at some of these barbs, we are seeing a little bit of northwesterly flow. So by all means, this could be a depression in the next advisory. Doesn't surprise me based on what I'm seeing here on the latest Recon data. So now the question is, how far west will this go and how strong could it be once it crosses some of the Leeward Islands over the next day or two? Looking at the latest GFS here at the surface wind plot, we can get an idea where our wave is. Keep in mind, this is not simulating the possible low-level swirl that we showed you on the satellite imagery, and we still here have an open wave trough, so it's going to matter a whole lot in the next advisory if this is closed or not, because if that is closed, this may not matter a whole lot, as a closed circulation usually means that the system is developing a little faster than what most of the global models indicate. But either way, the GFS here by this afternoon does show that there is going to be some pretty strong winds here on the northern side. And as we go forward in time here, we can see winds 25 to even 35 miles an hour. So even so, that if this is closed or not, there is going to be a lot of tropical depression force, possibly tropical storm force winds on the northern side of this, which is why we have tropical storm warnings out on this. And there are even some little spigots here of wind that is over 35 miles an hour. Now, the system really organizes by Tuesday. This is Tuesday morning as it passes, say, Guadalupe, Dominica, and Martinique Island, as well as St. Kitts and Nevis down here as well, and some of these other islands. We can see that the system will organize once it gets to Puerto Rico. Here are the U.S. and British Virgin Islands over here. You can see southeasterly winds, about 30 to 35 miles an hour. Keep in mind, here is Puerto Rico, and take a look at this. Once we go forward in time, this really develops in a hurry with that wind max that rotates over Puerto Rico. This would be 60 to 70 mile an hour winds moving over this. And I showed you all in yesterday's live stream that there's a lot of tall mountains here on Puerto Rico, so that the south-facing slopes here of Puerto Rico will likely lead to enhanced orographic flow over this area. And so when you think about it, there could be a lot of rainfall, possibly upwards of 8 to maybe even 12 inches on the southern facing slopes here of Puerto Rico, versus the northern slopes might see much lesser rainfall in the order of maybe 2 to 4 inches, because once air sinks, it warms and dries, and that's what usually happens. That's why you get a rain shadow effect here. But there will be some rain over Puerto Rico nevertheless, with a system that does something like this. It moves just to the southwest or over Puerto Rico. And then as that leaves the scene, the system will further organize, which we will look at the wider envelope here of the image, showing us over here where Bermuda is. And actually, we will put that up there on the screen so you all can see where Bermuda is right there. See that black dot? That's Bermuda. So going forward, you can see that the system does continue to organize and produce, again, tropical storm force winds, and then is likely to become a hurricane in about 3 or 4 days. That's what most of the model guidance still suggests us in today's update. And then as it heads towards, say, Bermuda here, it does continue to strengthen, and it is moving pretty slowly here. If we look at day 4, this is right about day 4, right about here, day 4. This is day 5, so it's not moving very much at all. It's moving fairly slow. And then by, say, day 5.5, even day 6 perhaps, this clips Bermuda with tropical storm force winds. This has winds of 50 to maybe 54 miles an hour. And if this misses Bermuda, this would likely be a hurricane at this point, certainly, maybe even a major hurricane at the very most, with winds of 110, 115 miles an hour as this continues to move off towards the north. But yes, Bermuda is not done seeing shifts east or west. So if we look at the 06Z run from last night, we can see it was east of Bermuda. If we look at the 0Z run from yesterday, it was west of Bermuda. And now on the 12Z run, it is actually a whole lot faster, which is telling us there's timing differences, a lot of uncertainties in that, and there is location uncertainties or track differences. So we are not sure yet exactly if this is how close this is going to get towards Bermuda. But right now there will be some sort of wind impacts. Winds tropical storm force or greater is what I am kind of predicting at this moment. And how close this gets to the United States remains to be announced or is to be determined. Looking at the European model, same wind forecast here, but on a different model, we can see that the system on the Euro, it doesn't do a whole lot with the system. And I'm a little surprised by that based on what I'm about to show you here on the hurricane model. Because as this gets, again, towards Bermuda, this is day 4 by Friday. You can see it ends up being east of Bermuda. So the GFS is still over here and the Euro is over here. And what I'm about to show you on the icon is a very concerning story, but still an unlikely scenario. So that's the two models there, the Euro on east of Bermuda and the GFS west of it. But I also wanted to show you another model that is pretty concerning for Bermuda. This is the HWRF model, a hurricane-specific model that is trained to only look at hurricanes. It's a meso model, trained for hurricanes. So as we go and look at, say, by Tuesday morning, here is Guadeloupe over here, okay? Guadeloupe Island is right there. And then we have our other islands. Dominica is right here. And then we have Martinique down to the south. And then, of course, St. Lucia here. And then we have Antigua and Barbuda over here, and St. Kitts and Nevis located over here. So you can see these other islands here gonna have at least some sort of tropical storm or tropical depression force winds. On this model, tropical storm force winds in this case, and pretty strong tropical storm force winds in yellow here. That's about 50 to 55 mile an hour winds over Antigua, Barbuda, as well as St. Kitts and Nevis up here to the north. St. Kitts and Nevis, that is, right? Yep. And then we go forward here into the rest of the islands here, the British Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands, Anguilla, which is these islands right in between, are going to get tropical storm force winds. I don't want to forget any locations, so that's why I am pronouncing all of these islands, if you all are wondering. But you can see once this gets north of Puerto Rico, on this model, it's northeast of Puerto Rico. So the best chances of orographic flow will be minute versus if a system does pass just to the southwest of Puerto Rico, you get the strongest upslope flow on the eastern side of that circulation. You're likely to get a lot more orographic enhancement. But now, as this departs, this is when the system could go boom, boom. All right, this is 66 hours. This is day 3. Really explodes in intensity. We'll see if this comes to pass. This is a fairly uncertain forecast because if we look at the 060 run, it was only at 968. Now this is at 946 millibars. So we don't know exactly how this all evolves until it departs these islands, because if it survives the wrath, it could really intensify. And here it is at 934 millibars. That's pretty strong to say the least. And I forgot to zoom in here. So yeah, right there, 120 knots. So that's pretty strong. And then it strengthens a little further. And here is the little island of Bermuda right there with hurricane force winds. This is that purple area, hurricane force winds moving over Bermuda on this particular run. This is the worst case scenario, unfortunately, on this particular model. If we look at the HMON model really quickly, we could also see Bermuda is on this thumbnail image right here. So there is Bermuda. Tropical storm force winds do miss the island completely because this is far enough east of that island, but still shows this becoming a formidable hurricane, possibly a major hurricane. And the HAFS B, let's look at that really quickly. This also shows something similar to the HWRF model with hurricane force winds, but a weaker system. But this would be a major hurricane because you have 102 knot winds. So maybe something significant for Bermuda. If it does happen, I will be streaming this live on the YouTube channel because this would be Saturday when this makes landfall, and I am available all day Saturday to open up into live streaming business on this system. So we'll keep you updated on that. So now the question is to all of you, why is this going to turn north? Why is this likely to not impact the United States? Well, if we look at our 3-plot series here from Tropical Tidbits, courtesy of him making this all possible, this is the color shading here. This is a rainbow shading of vorticity at 850 millibars. And then you have your 500 millibar height contours. See these black lines? That's the mid-level, that's the upper level height lines or geopotential height or a topographical map of the atmosphere. And then the 200 millibar winds here are these wind barbs. So we have upper level winds that do something like this. This divergent flow, like we talked about, is why we are seeing all of a sudden all this convection that is developing. So as we go forward in time, we can see what all is going to happen here. Actually, let's go to the 12Z run. That's a little bit better. So this is the 12Z run that just came out not long ago, showing us here is that trough of low pressure. So this is well modeled. This is not going anywhere. This is extremely, extremely consistent from run to run with this trough in place off the eastern seaboard. And what hurricanes like to do, they like to feel the weakness in the subtropical ridge to the north. They want to get the least path of resistance because we have a ridge of high pressure over here over the Azores. So there's a high there. We have another high of or another ridge of high pressure over Texas. So in between, we have this weakness in the ridge that develops, and there's an alleyway. There's an escape route for this to evacuate and move generally this way. And you'll see that here on the GFS model. If we go forward in time, you can see how it follows that weakness in the ridge. Now, once it approaches that weakness and once the turn to the north occurs, when it occurs still, will be important, because if the turn to the north happens a little bit sooner, then this trough here could actually dip a little further to the southeast, and the system could actually pinwheel a little closer to the coast of, say, New England before turning out to sea, of what we're about to see here on the GFS model. So there is a lot of uncertainty here beyond about the day 7 time frame, and as we go forward here, you can see how that happens. Again, the system gets a little close, not super close to the United States, but if we go to prior runs, this was more further offshore, and this is now the closest model run to the United States, is at least to the New England coastline that we've had in at least a couple of days. So this is going to be important to note. Do trends continue westward with this? That is to be announced. And then, of course, Nova Scotia up here, Newfoundland and the Labrador here in eastern Canada needs to be watching this, because this could be a pretty strong tropical storm, or actually this would be a hurricane at this point, or more of an extratropical hurricane at this given time, as it rounds the western periphery of the subtropical ridge that it's to its south. So now I'm going to walk you through the ensemble forecast. This time we're going to animate this so you can see exactly with what I'm looking at. Now this is delayed, of course. This is the 0Z output from last night on the ensemble forecast. This does not, we won't get a new ensemble forecast for another couple of hours. And I need to get this video out by 1 o'clock this afternoon. So we're going to have to use the 0Z run instead, which is pretty current given the conditions. So as we go forward here, we can see this is the track forecast, and most of the models do bring this over, say, Puerto Rico, the U.S. British Virgin Islands, Antigua, Anguilla, and Bermuda over the next day or two. And once this gets past Puerto Rico, how far west, how far northeast will this be is again to be announced. And also location-wise, some models that are most furthest east here have this moving faster versus models that are to the west have this moving a little slower, because it gets caught underneath maybe a weak ridge that tries to build to the north of the system, and the system is slowing down here at that point. So there is a lot of spread in the model guidance here, both timing and location, or track, I should say. And then as we go out today, this is day 7, we can see, yeah, look at that. That is a pretty big difference between how close this can get to the United States and how far this is away. But it looks like this is going to be impacting Bermuda in some sense because of our spaghetti plot, but how close to Bermuda is also to be announced. But this does get close. One of the members here bring this to hurricane intensity really close to Cape Cod, as well as Nantucket in the United States. So, yeah, this is going to be worth noting. Looking at the GFS, this is the 12Z output. So this is the latest model that we have on this plot series because we're able to retrieve that more sooner than, say, looking at the Euro. And this does go much further to the west. We can see most of the ensembles still want to bring this over Puerto Rico and even over the Dominican Republic, perhaps. And look at this. A few of these bring this over the Bahamas still, and then they're out to sea. But look at some of these models, the most westerly models, bring this not far off the coast too. So on both of these, we do see some similarities here. But on the GEFS ensemble, there's a big spread here. Because when this turn to the north happens will be important. We're not done eating spaghetti, folks. Here's a look at the initialization on the model track guidance on PTC 5, soon to become Tropical Depression 5, probably in the next advisory. And what we have here, again, most of the models bring this over Dominica and just to the south, and then eventually over Puerto Rico. And then off to the north they go towards Bermuda. So again, not much difference here, reason to think. And the OFCL is the NHC forecast, and this does get really close or on top of Bermuda in about 5 to almost 6 days. Looking at the intensity guidance, this is a very tricky one. Actually, this is a bit more tricky than the track guidance in itself. Actually, they're both tricky equally. And when we look at this, the NHC forecast brings this to a high-end Category 2 intensity, and therefore my intensity forecast is following suit. I do believe that this is going to become a Category 2 with winds of about 105 to 110 miles an hour in about 5 days. And it is worth noting the majority of the models do bring this to a hurricane. So we are likely to see a hurricane of some intensity within the next 4 to 5 days. If that's a Category 3, 2, or 1, we will have to wait and see on how models correct in the next couple of run cycles, if this uptrends or if this downtrends. But either way, this is going to be a formidable hurricane nevertheless in about 5 days on the approach to Bermuda. Now, the reason why this is able to intensify gradually over the next several days is because, well, we don't have a whole lot of vertical wind shear to contend with. Less than 15 knots overall. The wind shear does increase beyond day 5 as it encroaches onto that trough of lower pressure. Again, that trough off the eastern seaboard. So the shear does go up to 30 knots. And the maximum potential intensity here, theoretically, is Category 5 throughout the entire 5 to 7 day forecast. So it is worth noting on this too that this does have a high ceiling until that shear increases. And sea surface temperatures do decrease a little bit, but not so much so that this is not going to intensify. And relative humidity values do decrease notably beyond the day 5 time frame, but it will likely encounter baroclinic deepening, which means it's going to encounter isotropic lifting from troughs and that sort of thing to help keep this fairly intense. Sometimes you can get stronger systems the further north they go if they encounter troughs like that. So this is the official 2 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center, and they have winds of 35 miles an hour, movement to the west at 26 miles an hour, and we can see all these islands here, Antigua and Anguilla, as well as Bermuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, as well as, say, Guadeloupe and some of these other islands, including Puerto Rico, are under tropical storm warnings. This needs to be taken seriously. Heavy rainfall, strong winds are anticipated. In fact, when we take a look at the rest of the impacts, the arrival time and chances of tropical storm force winds for Puerto Rico will come in on Tuesday at 8 p.m. and some of the islands before that. And then, of course, in Bermuda, we could see tropical storm force winds as early as Friday morning or Friday early afternoon. with chances there being at 40 to 50% chance of that occurring. So chances are increasing for tropical storm force winds, unfortunately, over Bermuda based on this map. Now the storm surge forecast is as follows. So St. Thomas and St. John, St. Croix, both having 1 to 3 feet of storm surge. This includes for eastern Puerto Rico, like San Juan, could have up to about 1 to 3 feet of storm surge. If you are on some of these other islands, you could see 1 to 3 feet of storm surge. Another product that I wanted to show you all is the rainfall forecast, how much rain will accumulate on some of these islands. So here's a look at that map here provided by the National Hurricane Center and the Weather Prediction. Actually, not the Weather Prediction Center. This could be it. Actually, yeah, Weather Prediction Center making these maps. So Dominica here could have up to maybe 6 inches of rainfall. Guadalupe Island here, you might see up to 6 inches. And that's kind of the area that they highlighted here, 6 inches locally. Antigua, you could see up to about 4 to 6 inches. Bermuda up here to the north, you might see 2 to 4 inches. St. Kitts and Nevis, you might see up to 6 inches. St. Martin, St. Croix, both coming in at up to maybe 6 inches. But there's this little area right here, you might see up to 8 inches of rainfall, maybe locally higher, depending on if the center passes just to the west of Puerto Rico. You get that orographic flow, you might see up to a foot of rainfall perhaps with this. And of course, the western slopes here, or the southern slopes of the eastern Dominican Republic, you might see even quite a bit of rainfall. Now upgrading that to maybe as much as 4 to 6 inches, but that has lower confidence. So we will keep an eye on this if this goes up or if this goes down a little bit based on where the center passes. Now the key messages for potential Tropical Cyclone 5, soon to become Tropical Depression 5. The disturbance is expected to become a tropical storm as it reaches the Leeward Islands. Tropical storm warnings are now in effect for most of these islands, where tropical storm conditions are expected to begin late tonight. Heavy rainfall may result in locally considerable flash flooding, mudslides in areas of the Leeward and Virgin Islands by later today into Wednesday, and over Puerto Rico by late Tuesday into Thursday. A tropical storm warning is now in effect for the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, where tropical storm conditions are expected to begin Tuesday night or early Wednesday. I did forget to show you all the surf forecast, but we're looking at surf anywhere between 10 to 15 feet on some of these islands. So please stay away from the beaches over the next 2 to 4 days, 2 to 3 days at least, as the system remains a threat to these islands. Please, folks, I don't want anyone to get injured, to drown, to die because of high surf, and you're not prepared. All right. But anyways, to review with what we talked about briefly here, if you're, again, on these islands, especially north of Guadalupe, Dominica, and Martinique, you definitely need to be taking this seriously with tropical storm warnings that are now being issued. Heavy rainfall, strong winds, flooding, storm surge, and high surf are all expected for these areas. So all I can do is make sure you all are safe and prepared for some impacts. And then, of course, once this turns to the north, could this still impact Bermuda in the next 4 to 5 days? That is to be determined based on when and where this turn to the north happens and the timing of the trough to the north as well, and steering currents. All right. But anyways, if you did enjoy today's detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion on potential Tropical Cyclone 5, soon to become Tropical Depression 5 in this video, please consider subscribing, folks. If you did like this video, please share this with your family and friends on social media. All right, we need to get this out to a much larger audience. YouTube likes that, and also I love it too. Also hit the like button and also ring the bell notification icon. But until next time, I'll be back with you tomorrow with another update on this tropical storm depression.